We're offline.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
It's alive!
We all go a little mad sometimes.
Meddling kid. Trace the call. It's coming from inside the
Be
house.
afraid. Be buried.
How's it going, people, and welcome to our new episode of Adventures in Murderland. We are an LGBTQ plus true crime comedy podcast hosted by me, Mike James, and the Lady Gaga to my struggling songwriter Bradley Cooper, Alan Cassidy, I think.
Hey guys.
Hi. I don't know. I was thinking of that movie.
Could have said the Lady Gaga to my Lady Starlight.
No, maybe, but I wanted to reference that new movie that we haven't seen. Is it even out?
Born. It's
Is it even
out yet. It comes out in October, I think.
October. But there's another movie in October that comes out, which is we're more excited about, I think.
What's that?
Halloween. We're not going to do any sort of chit-chat at the start of this, by the way. So we're just going to cut straight into this. Everybody who is listening, this is part 2 of our 3-part series covering the horrific crimes of both Henry Lee Lucas and Ottis Toole, 2 of the world's most notorious serial killers and definitely 2 of the most twisted individuals to ever grace this planet. Alan, I know you asked for a quick recap of the episodes, so just in case anyone has forgotten, in last week's episode we discussed the tragic childhood and early life of Henry Lee Lucas, including the moment when, after years of physical, mental and emotional abuse, he killed his own mother. We then went right up to the point where Henry, now a drifter, walked into a soup kitchen in Jacksonville, Florida, where he first catches the eye of a man called Ottis Toole.
That name still sounds very familiar to me.
Ottis Toole?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Am I thinking of somebody called O'Toole?
Oh, sorry, I just knocked the whole thing down. Maybe you're thinking of someone called O'Toole. I'm not too sure.
Does sound very familiar.
I don't. Maybe you've just heard the name before. Maybe. Through all the different true crime shit that we've watched before.
Tons.
If you haven't already, make sure to follow us on Twitter at MurderlandPod, and also go like our Facebook page, Adventures in Murderland. Now, just jumping straight into this. First off, I thought before we continue with the story about where the 2 go, Henry and Ottis, where they 2 go, I thought as we'd spent an entire episode going over Henry's life up until that point, we would go to Otis's life up until that point as well.
Okay.
And spoiler alert, the similarities between his and Henry's childhood are eerily similar. So much so that we're not going to spend an entire episode on Ottis Toole's life. We're just going to sort of quickly go through his backstory a little bit, and then we will pick up with the story of this one.
Yeah, no problem.
So Ottis Toole, born March 5th, 1947, was raised in Jacksonville, Florida. He was also, similar to Henry, was abused by his mother in a similar fashion, including being dressed in girls' clothes, and his mum often referring to him as Becky. So both. How strange.
Really?
How strange that both gentlemen, well, I won't call them gentlemen, to be honest with you, they're very far from gentlemen-like. How strange that both parents dressed them up in girls' clothes at the time.
That's really odd.
Maybe they sort of rekindled over that and shared their stories of that as children.
Imagine.
As young, yeah, I can imagine they probably were sharing those stories and going, "Oh, you too." You too. As a young boy, Ottis was the victim of incest at the hands of many close relatives, including his older sister and a next-door neighbour. Ottis also claimed he was forced to have sex with a friend of his father's when he was just 5 years old. That's pretty fucked up, right? So you can see, like I said, you can see the similarities between the two men, Henry and Ottis, already, and the fact, the trauma and sexual abuse. His grandmother was apparently an extreme Satanist who exposed him to various satanic practices and rituals in his youth, including self-mutilation and grave robbing. She reportedly also gave him the cute nickname of Devil's Child.
Oh.
Like, grandmas would usually call you like sweetheart or something like that. When this is devil's child. Come here, devil's child. Also, by the way, I'm very much aware when I'm talking about Satanists. These are I always I add the word extreme Satanist to these
they're
things.
extremists. You get extremists of every single religion to go in.
Because I'm aware, okay, that Satanists aren't the way they are painted in the movies, and they don't worship the devil, surprisingly, contrary to popular belief. But
And you were Satanist.
well, no, I am not, but I do have a membership card for it. But that'll be explained in a whole another thing. Separate. Guys, if you're wondering, yes, I do have a membership card for the Satanic Temple. Anyway, back to this story. Less about me, less more about this guy. Otis suffered from various learning disabilities, including dyslexia and ADHD. He was also illiterate and also suffered from epilepsy, which resulted in frequent seizures. If you remember, Henry also suffered from seizures as well, but I think that was because of the numerous beatings
knocks to the head
that he'd received. Throughout his childhood, Otis was reported to have ran away from home, often as a means to escape the abuse, often preferring to sleep in abandoned houses, which he'd later set on fire. He became so accustomed to doing that he sort of became a bit of a serial arsonist from a young age, and it was claimed that he potentially got sexually aroused by fires, but I don't know if there's anything to corroborate
if there's any truth
that
to
information.
Yeah.
Yes. I don't really know too much about arsonists. I don't know if they get a sexual kick out of it or not. Maybe that's something I will Google after this. Otis felt he knew he was gay when he was just 10 years old, and claimed to have had a relationship with a neighbour when he was 10, and had a relationship with a neighbour when he was 12. I don't know if it's the same neighbour that did things with him. I'm assuming not. I'm assuming you wouldn't go into a relationship with someone who abused you.
No.
I don't know. Otis dropped out of school in the 9th grade, no longer attending school. He instead took to visiting gay bars. So he's going out pretty freaking young. I'm assuming they weren't IDing him at these bars.
Yeah, they wouldn't be.
By the time he'd reached his teens, he was a male sex worker and was known to dress in drag for certain clientele. I've heard this sort of went on a fair bit in the past. With gay men in particular, they couldn't really, a lot of people couldn't, they were kicked out at a young age if they came out. And a lot of the times the only work they could find was sex work. So,
well, we've seen it on movies and things like that, haven't we? Because no one's going to take on a gay person back in them days.
No, not someone, and especially if you're a kid as well, you're not going to get a job, and you're probably on the streets, and it's just not a good situation. It's a shame that they had to resort to that, really. But that certainly isn't the worst thing that's ever happened in Otis's life. Otis claimed to have committed his first murder at the age of 14, when after being propositioned for sex by a travelling salesman, an altercation occurred, which ended with Otis running over the salesman with his own car.
Wow.
However, once again, that cannot be 100% confirmed, as kind of is the case with a good handful of the parts of this story, but you will find out why at the end of the story, at the end of part 3. But we'll get to that. But this is all the information we have so far from different accounts. So this is where we're going with it. Okay? Did you get it?
I get it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Between 1966 and 1973, Otis pretty much drops off the map, and his whereabouts at this particular time are unclear. It's believed, however, that he did become a drifter, moving around the southwestern United States, supporting himself by doing the sex work and also by begging as well. 1974 comes around, and Otis pops back up in Nebraska, where he was one of the prime suspects in the 1974 murder of 24-year-old Patricia Webb, but no charges were ever pressed. Shortly after, he left Nebraska and briefly settled in Boulder, Colorado, where just 1 month later he was accused of yet another murder. That was that of 31-year-old Ellen Holman, who was murdered on October 14th, 1974. But again, before any real investigation was able to take place, Ottis left Boulder and headed back down to his hometown in Jacksonville. I Googled that, by the way, because I was interested to see, because we do like a bit of a time jump from this bit to this bit, and I was like, why did it take him so long to get there? So I Google mapped from Boulder, Colorado to Jacksonville, and it's 1,722 miles, which would take approximately 563 hours on foot. So if you've not got a car or any public transport, if you're trying to you've got no money, you're trying to hijack, maybe hitchhike. It's going to take a fair little while. It jumps. So from October 14th, 1974, we jump into early 1975, and this is when Ottis arrives in Jacksonville. For what we know of, he at least tries to live a normal life once he arrives there. Not too much craziness goes on. On January 14th, 1976, he even married a woman named Novella, who was 25 years his senior.
Why?
I don't know. What if he was gay? Why did he do it?
If he knew he was gay.
A lot of people did back then, right? A lot of people sort of got married to sort of hide the fact that they were gay. A lot of people had kids and things that had the fact that they were gay. It was all like a little cover. Did you have a question about the woman at all who was 25 years his senior or anything like that? No?
No.
You didn't? Oh,
no.
Fuck. Because usually I, because you sometimes ask questions which are so left field and curveball and are things that usually usually things I would never ever think anyone would ask, but then from from doing this podcast with you, I've learned that you do ask these random questions from time to time. I did Google, because I thought you were going to ask how old that would make her at that particular time. So I actually did a little investigation, and I looked it up. So, for Ottis at this point, from March 5th, 1947, when he was born, to January 14th, 1976, that would make him 28 years, 10 months, and 9 days old, making his wife around 54 at this point.
Okay.
I really thought you were going to ask that. I thought you were going to go, so how old is he again at this point? So how old that would make her? I thought you were going to ask me that.
To be honest, though, it's something that I would ask.
That is something that you would ask, and I'd be like, no one would ever think to ever ask that question, but I'm sure. So when I was doing these notes, I thought, I'm going to put a little note down here just in case, because I spent the time doing it. I thought I'd share it. So that same year, 1976, Ottis enters the soup kitchen where he strikes up a conversation with our main man from episode 1, Henry Lee Lucas. And it's here where things start to get interesting.
I'm excited.
I think it's funny that like an hour and 15 minutes in, and it's just now where I'm saying things are going to get interesting. I mean, hopefully the whole thing's been interesting.
To be fair, the first episode was really interesting.
But it gets even more interesting, is what I probably should have said. Henry Otis tells... restart. Henry tells Otis about his situation, that he's a drifter, he's got nowhere to live, etc., etc. So Otis decides to invite Henry to come and live with him.
With his missus?
Yeah. Okay. I'm assuming that, because when in the first episode we looked at some photos of Henry in his youth, and he wasn't bad looking. He was kind of semi-attractive, right? Yeah. So I could probably guess maybe Otis probably saw something in him like that he may have liked.
Maybe.
The living arrangement, though, as you said, he was with his wife, so the living arrangement was complicated, to say the least. At the time, Otis was actually sharing a house with his mother, Sarah, and her husband, Robert. Obviously, his wife, Novella, a nephew, Frank Powell Jr., and... I know, it's like the fucking Brady Bunch. And Frida Powell, who was Otis's 11-year-old niece. They all lived in the same house. So to invite another person on that roof is a bit...
Pretty crowded.
little bit crowded. But if you remember as well, Henry was kind of used to that because wasn't it like 7 people